Howdy. Have you ever felt like you don't belong, as if you're not normal or ordinary? What is ordinary? Is there one type or many different types? The reason I ask this is because I'm maybe not what I would call your ordinary, but I'm what I would call mine. And part of what I consider mine is ADHD. But what is ADHD? It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. And in a nutshell, it's a dysregulation of attention, and you could probably include emotions. It's the impulsivity to buy the thing you didn't actually go into the shop for, plus it's the thing that you didn't mean to say, but you just said it anyway. And it's the hyperactivity to have so much energy, but sometimes having no energy at all, both internal and external. Going back to ordinary, though, I've not always seen myself as ordinary at all. When you're constantly told off for how you are being your natural self, whether it's daydreaming out the window, although I have to admit sometimes that wasn't great, or whether it came to how you like to do a certain piece of work, it can be really damaging for your self-esteem and your mental health. This wasn't always the case, though. When I was at secondary school, I went to a special educational needs school, so I wasn't gifted. I wasn't somebody who could easily mask my ADHD behind, say, intelligence. But I was around other people who were like me, very much like me. At the time, it felt natural. It felt more normal. This started to change a bit more, though, when I went to college, as I went to an ordinary college, but when I went there, I was pushed into a new field. I was pushed amongst a bunch of people that weren't like me, who were different to me, or how I saw them, normal or ordinary. This made me feel like I had to change the way I was and hide behind the door of society's expectations and wants of who I was to be. This pushed me even further down the road of a lower self-esteem and mental health. When I went to university, this felt more like I didn't belong. And even though it wasn't as bad socially, because there was much more people who were open-minded to who I was, the educational system felt like I had to keep to a certain standard when it came to work, how I worked, even though people always said, you find your own way of working. I didn't see it like that. I saw the problem as me. After this, I decided to go on medication to try and help this part of me that did not feel like I belonged. And I have to say, on one side of it, it felt great. I was able to pay attention to conversations a bit longer than usual. I was able to calm down. I was able to keep my room clean, which I have to say that was a bonus. But a part of me did not feel like it was right. It did not feel complete. There was still a tiny part which was saying that this wasn't the true me, the true ordinary. So I came off medication. I explored all different avenues. One of the avenues that I found was neurodiversity, but then I started digging. I started figuring out, what if, instead of going against my ADHD, like going against a wave, you go along with the wave. You go along with the ADHD. So I experimented with this. I saw what would happen. For example, daydreaming. I would daydream and explore my curiosities. Once again, this was good. Unless I was in a lecture, then it wasn't as good. I did pick up some parts, though. And I just wanted to explore what would happen if I just accepted who I was. But this isn't a story about ADHD. This is not a story about ordinary. This is a story about my ADHD and my ordinary. That's to say that every person has their own form of ADHD and their own form of ordinary. But when you look at it from that angle, how can it be possible when you have places like social media that say you have to pick one side or another? I always believed that I had to be on medication or I had to not be on medication, that I had to choose either ADHD as a superpower or purely as a disorder. And then I realized this wasn't the case. I just had to find out how to make it mine, how I had to make who I was me. The problem is, though, when you have society constantly telling you these different angles, what you should do, how you should be, what you should take, it can be even more damaging. And it can be really bad for the mental health once again. So you have to look at other angles to what you can do instead. And that is how I found mine. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be polarizations. There can be another option, and that is finding our own ordinary. Finding out who we are truly to ourselves instead of what social media tells us or what the internet tells us. It's very easy to look on the internet to find our solutions to our problems, but it doesn't help. It doesn't truly help at all. Another example of how I used my own ADHD for a passion was at uni, where I created the TEDxUWE Neurodiversity Society to try and allow other people to come together, to try and help each other, to socialize with each other and create a community where we didn't have to feel like we were being told we should act a certain way. That's why I think it's really important that I give you really two important points. One, awareness. We need to make people aware of what ADHD is to us, not what ADHD is in the generic form. We have to tell people how it affects us individually, what help we may need, but also looking at how we can use it to our benefit if that is a possibility. It's also looking at if we can choose our own path, if you have to take medication, if you don't have to take medication, if you look at it purely as a superpower, a disorder, or a bit of both. You have to make it what's right for you and good for your mental health instead of saying it's got to be the way that society tells you. Second, change. We need to be able to say to society that this is who we are, this is how we're going to do it. We choose our own path, and we've got to tell people we have chose that path without people telling us that you have to go this way or that way, just because that's what society expects from you. I mentioned at the start about what ADHD is, but I gave you a generic form of what ADHD was. I didn't give you the ADHD that I see in myself based on how I see my own ordinary. I don't see attention as being a problem where I can't focus on everything. I focus on the things I'm interested in. So I integrate those interests into my life. And I try to move around them. When I need to do a task, I try to integrate an interest into it to make it work. The energy, what I get from my hyperactivity, I use that to drive my passions, but also to drive who I am, to drive my, as my friends may call it, slightly eccentric self, but they might call it a different word. And the impulsivity, now I'm working on that bit I can't really think of anything good for at the moment. And when it comes to emotions, I just see my emotions as being passions for what I believe in myself, who I am. They are passions of how I see the world and how I see the world differently to other people. One thing I want everyone to take away from this is to find your own ordinary. Don't worry about what the internet tells you or what other people tell you. Listen to them, but don't take it as if that is the absolute. Develop it, make it yours, and see where that takes you, because it may take you somewhere which is great. It might help you find out who you truly are without society giving you this absolute that you have to stick by, giving you this idea that you have to be this number in this society. You create who you are today, and you create who you want to be. You create your own ordinary. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.